Good evening, everybody. We aren't starting quite yet, but we'll be starting in a few minutes here. For those of you who are going to be participating via our online polling, would be a good chance to try the QR code, see if it works. If you have any issues for it, I'm also happy to grab some paper surveys and run them around too.
Just so you know, when you scan that, if you go to Google, you get a screen
That's
there's no place to enter the address.
Should the non-speaker just like be, I guess, hanging out on the side, or should we like where position?
I think this side, because she'll have the camera angle.
Sure. That way I'll have it, yeah. With the background. Your turn. Thank you. Sure. Thank you.
Good evening. Before we get started, we're going to have just a brief announcement from our Spanish language interpreter. So if you want to go ahead.
Hola, buenas tardes. Antes de comenzar, vamos a escuchar un anuncio de la intérprete. Hi, everyone. My name is Jackie. I'm here with my co-interpreter Dulce, who's outside, and we're with Sensontle Language Justice Cooperative, which is based here in Asheville. Hola, buenas tardes a todos. Mi nombre es Jackie Fitzgerald y estoy acompañada por mi co-intérprete Dulce Valderas, que está en la puerta, y representamos a la Cooperativa de Justicia del Lenguaje Sensontle. We will be providing simultaneous interpretation between English and Spanish today. So anyone who is not bilingual in English and Spanish will be able to hear both languages. Vamos a estar interpretando simultáneamente entre inglés y español, así que todo el mundo va a poder entender la información y ser escuchado. And so we are using simultaneous interpreting equipment. If there's someone who would like to listen to the meeting in Spanish, we have these devices back there and some at the front that we will be handing out to folks who would like to listen in Spanish. And if those folks would like to make a comment or ask a question in Spanish, they will be able to. We will just go up to the mic and interpret their message out loud. Cualquier persona que quiera escuchar la interpretación al español durante la reunión tendrá acceso al equipo de interpretación. Hay algunas piezas aquí y otras en la mesa en la entrada. Eso es por si quieres escuchar a la reunión en español, y cualquier comentario o pregunta que tenga va a ser interpretado al inglés para que todo el mundo escuche. And if there are any questions about what we do, we'll be around after the event for a couple minutes too. And so we hope you all have a great meeting, and thank you for having us. Si tengan preguntas acerca de qué hace Sensontle, qué es, vamos a estar aquí un ratito después de la reunión. Así que estamos aquí a la orden y muchas gracias. Espero que tengan una muy buena reunión. Thank you. Gracias.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And first, I want to welcome you. This is the community feedback session for the Affordable Housing Plan update. My name is Nikki Reed. I'm the director of the Community and Economic Development Department for the City of Asheville, so a proud city staff member serving this wonderful community. I just want to thank you so much for being here, because our success and our staff team really depends on engaging with our community members. And I just want to highlight and stand in gratitude for your public attendance tonight. So thanks so much. It's good to see you. I know I've seen some familiar faces that came to our engagement at the Asheville Mall, and it's just great to see you all again, and it's great to see the new faces as well. So thank you so much for being here. So the City of Asheville is undertaking this affordable housing plan to really guide what the future is for affordable housing. It's a complex system. We know that housing costs are high in our community, and so we want to be able to develop a plan that we can really understand and guide our efforts over the next several years. And so to do that, the city, through a Dogwood Health Trust grant, has partnered with Enterprise Community Partners to help us think through that plan. Enterprise works with a multitude of communities across America. I'm fascinated at how affordable housing plays out in our community when thinking about across the nation, how this conversation is happening in different communities in the Midwest, on the coast, and just really being aware of what it means for our specific part of the world here in Asheville, North Carolina. So with that, again, thank you for coming, and I want to turn it over to Enterprise. Thanks.
Thank you, Nikki. Well, good evening, everybody. We can do better than that. Good evening, everybody. Thank you all so much for coming out this evening. We know it's a beautiful day. You could be anywhere else enjoying the sunshine, and you chose to be here with us, and we are so grateful for that. Like Nikki said, my name is Vithia Palmer, and I am Director of Equitable Housing Solutions with Enterprise Advisors. We are a nonprofit, mission-driven consulting team that works with communities like Asheville who are really trying to understand and solve the complex housing challenges they're facing and move their communities toward the vision that a lot of people have of a more inclusive and equitable and affordable future. With me today, I have my colleague, Jara Smith, who's actually our lead for this project, and we're really excited to be sharing with you about the work that we've done, but more importantly, hearing from you. So y'all are gonna see me on my phone tonight. I'm just moving slides as we use this Menti system. So I've said a little bit about myself, but we wanna hear who you are and why you're here in this room today. We're going to talk a bit about the engagement and the research that we've been doing over the past few months. I know we've seen a few of you, and some of you have probably participated in the community housing survey that we did in January and February as well. So we'll be sharing some of what we have heard through that work. And then really our hope is to talk through recommendations. I'm going to give you a warning. It's a lot. So I'd encourage you, we're going to post these documents online after this meeting so you can go back and revisit them. You know, you've got your handouts that have a summary of everything as well. So appreciate the feedback you share tonight, but know that this is absolutely not the end of this conversation. So has everybody been able to log into Menti who's planning on using Menti? I'll give everybody a minute to pull out their phones. This is one of those few times at a community meeting we want to see you on your phones. So what you should see, sorry, this is a little confusing, but it's the way Menti is set up. If you do it right, you'll land on a screen that says instructions. So if you see instructions, you're in the right place. Does anybody have any issues or need a paper survey? Okay, well, over the course of the evening, if you have any issues, let us know. We've got a stack of the paper surveys here, so we're happy to run those to you if you would prefer to share your notes in that form as well. So like I said, my name is Vithia. I'm based in Chicago these days, but really fortunate to be working on this project with you all. It's a community project, truly. But we want to hear, why are you all here tonight? So should start populating on the screen as you start sharing your answers. And for those, if anybody is not using the Menti, if you want to raise a hand or share with us by word what brought you here this evening, we'd love to hear from you through the microphone as well. And we've got one up here that we can run around the room if anybody wants to share by voice. Great. And the way this works is the words that are repeated show up the biggest. So not surprisingly, we see housing in the middle there. We see affordable, information, learning, equity, advocacy. And then we saw hope. That one really resonated with me. Great. Age-friendly design, being a part of the solution. We love that. All right. Well, it's great to see and hear all the different things that brought us here tonight. I'm sure you resonate with some of the other ones that you see on the screen, perhaps too, even if it wasn't one that you personally added. So to start this evening, I'm going to share a little bit about what we've done so far. So like I said, we did an online survey earlier this year and had a few hundred responses. We also did some in-person events, including a pop-up at the Asheville Mall, an event at the Shiloh Community Center. We met with some residents one-on-one and in focus groups. We also met with stakeholders who work in the affordable housing world, who are a part of these solutions every day as well. In addition, we looked at census data, really the hard numbers, the best data that we have available to us. And then with that, did some population projections to help understand not only where we are today and how those numbers have changed over the past years, but also likely what might be ahead for the city in terms of population in the years to come. So I'm going to move through these quickly because I really want to spend most of the evening hearing from you all, but we did want to share a snapshot briefly of what we have heard. We're going to organize these into 3 loose buckets, the first being who lives here today, the second being where do people live, how is housing developed currently, and the third being, what are external factors or not people necessarily centered factors that impact what the city is looking like today, how it's been changing, and what that might mean for the future as well. So first, this plan, it's all about people. Well, it's an affordable housing plan. We don't need an affordable housing plan if it's not for the people itself. So we really want to make sure that this plan centers those who are most impacted by affordable housing challenges, as well as those who've maybe already been displaced because of not being able to afford to live in the city. So a few of the key findings, and I'm not going to read every single one of these because we would be here for hours if we reflected back everything that we've heard over the last few months, but just wanted to touch on a few of these. The first is that we know that residents experience the effects of structural racism, and that's everybody. The city really feels resonates with things that have happened in the past as well as things that are happening today, and that really applies to everybody. We also know, looking at census data, that lower income residents really feel the pinch the most. A number that often we think about in terms of housing is the area median income, and then kind of relate different households based off their incomes to that number. So just as an example, about 60% of that area median income is a person earning $35,700. Or for a family of four, that's a household that has an income of $51,000. So if you hear us refer to 60% of the area median income tonight, think about those numbers as reference points. But we know that residents who have that income or lower feel the pinch of this housing challenge the most. At the same time, we know that property values are rising in certain parts of the city. And with that, people are feeling rising housing taxes, whether you're a homeowner or you're a property owner, and that's being passed on to renters. But something that really stood out to me as we did a lot of listening is that housing means more than shelter to people. And yes, housing is shelter. It absolutely is that physical safety, but it's also about where you are in the city. It's your connections to the people around you. It's about how you are, whether you're located close to your school or your job or your kids' schools, and those other essentials and amenities, and the things we like doing for fun. So people said they loved their home because it was close to a park or a trail. It was something we really enjoyed hearing about, that sense of how home is more than just the four walls that you're under. And then there's also the understanding that a lot of newer transplants, as the city has been growing, do have higher incomes. And there's a growing perception that a lot of newer development isn't necessarily for existing residents, but is for newer people. And so we've heard a lot of concerns about displacement, not only in a future-oriented way, but also just it's a reality that we've heard that residents have experienced. So I'm going to move us to a quick poll here, just so we can test out Menti a little bit before we get into the feedback session. But this is a question that we ask often, and I'm curious what you all think. What portion of housing in Asheville do you think was built before 1980? All right, I'm gonna close it. This is a smart crowd. The answer is 54%. And so we looked at where Asheville stacks when compared to Buncombe County in North Carolina and the country. And we know that Asheville does have a relatively older stock than a lot of other places. And we also know that Asheville is a really different place than it was in 1980. And so it's important to think about, if most of our housing was built before then, what does that mean for the future? What does that mean for today, most importantly? Is there a mismatch between the needs of residents and the housing stock that currently exists? And so, yeah, we found that there is quite a bit of mismatch in terms of the affordability of housing, so how much it actually costs and how much income residents have. In terms of accessibility, something that we'll talk about in a minute here is around Asheville's aging population and the number of seniors, and what types of accessible needs are needed for seniors as well as individuals who might have disabilities, who we heard often struggle to find housing that meets their needs as well. Housing type is also something that came up. We know a lot of homes in Asheville are single-family detached homes, and there's less so that are multifamily or even single-family attached. And so people want to have choice in where they live, and thinking about the needs of people in that way. And then size also. the number of residents who have larger families versus smaller, and the newer housing that's being developed. There's a mismatch between what's being built and what the future of housing size looks like as well. Something else to think about with the age of housing is the quality. We know a lot of housing needs some TLC. It needs some critical repairs, both for health and safety, but also just to whether that's a new handicap ramp or different handlebars or accessibility features that people need. We know there's a lot of needs for that. We also heard in terms of mold or pests, issues like that a lot of residents are experiencing. The quality of housing is something that's been a challenge. So it's not just affordability, it's also about quality. But looking to the future, when we asked residents what future they want for the city, they think about a city that is sustainably developed, that's thoughtfully planned, and is intentionally inclusive. So thinking about the need to preserve the housing that we have today is something that we heard a lot about, but also thinking about what does development in the future look like that's new. There's a range of ideas. We know that the city is not a monolith, that there is a diversity of opinions around what density and smart growth could or should mean for the city looking forward. So it's something we're thinking about. It's not just how to build individual units, but the form that it takes along the way too. And then last but not least on this one, thinking about city processes and existing city housing finance tools that exist. Thinking about where the needs are and how those tools are set up. And we found that there's ways that the city can realign some of their tools to better meet the needs moving forward, which is why we're excited to talk about solutions. We're going to do a few more quick polls here. Is Menti working for everybody so far? Do a quick check-in. Yeah, so if you go to menti.com, so MENTI, so it's at the top of the screen there, it should give you a place to type in a code. And if you need me to read that out, I'm happy to do that. You're welcome. Great. All right. Once again, we've got a very smart room. The correct answer is seniors. So we know that Asheville's population is going to age significantly over the next 28 years, very likely. 3/4 of growth, we know the city, I'm going to move to the next table really quickly here, but 3/4 of the growth is expected to be adults actually 50 or older. And 1/3 of that growth will be adults 70 and older. So while I know there's a lot of questions around young professionals who are moving to the city, based off the projections that our team did, adults in the 20 to 49 window will represent 6% of the city's growth. So I know this is a lot of information, but we wanted to share what we found. So if you look at the very far right of the screen, you'll see that Asheville's estimated change between 2022 and 2050 projections have total growth at 13,713 people roughly. And again, this is here where we're thinking about what do households look like? What does that mean? It's not just about people, but also about households as we think about housing. And so as more and more seniors tend to live by themselves, estimates are that 44% of people 65 and older will live alone compared to those only 29% aged 15 to 64. So thinking about the number of units that are needed to keep up with that. So a few external trends, we started touching on a few of those there, but we know Asheville is growing really fast. We were at a meeting earlier this week and somebody said, how is Asheville different or the same as other communities that you work with? And the first thing that I thought about was just the growth. We work with a lot of cities that are actually seeing declines in population or have stayed flat for the last 50 years. Asheville's really unique in just how fast it is growing. And so that's something, whether it's remote workers that the city is seeing or seniors, we know that we really have to be thinking about that and what that means for residents who are here today. We also know there's a tension between growth and bringing in new people and being inclusive, but also preserving what makes Asheville truly Asheville. none of this should be new to you, I think, but we know the tourism industry provides a lot of jobs. But unfortunately, a lot of the jobs that are in those industries don't have wages that meet the costs of housing today. So that's a major mismatch that we saw when we were looking at the numbers. We also know that more and more employees accordingly are commuting outside of the city, or commuting live outside of the city and commuting in. And that's a number that we've also had an eye on, as we know it's really important to keep a good balance of residents who are able to live and work here. And then just nationally, the cost of development has risen as well. So can't divorce that from the equation of what goes into building more housing and preserving housing to meet residents' needs. So I'm gonna pause here. Any questions or comments or thoughts? And we've got a microphone we can run to you. Yes, we've got a hand up behind you, Nikki.
I can yell. Oh, I'm live streaming, so I want to hear. Great, thank you.
I was surprised to see the number 13,000 for household growth over a period of 28 years. That seems low to me. I think Asheville is a climate refuge destination. I think we're going to see twice as many people coming here as you're forecasting. I think that's a really low-end estimate.
Definitely noted. And I should have prefaced all of this with everything that you're seeing tonight is draft, right? Like the plan is not done, so we appreciate any comments or questions or things that you think we should look further into before rolling out the plan. So that is something we can do a little more digging on, so thank you. Yes.
In your initial slides, when you were reporting on the survey and the focus groups and your conclusions, do you have disaggregated data for those to show how folks in different demographics, different racial demographics responded to the questions you were asking that should have show, obviously you're looking at overall patterns, which is great, but like, are there differences in how people perceive, the city based on class, race, et cetera?
Absolutely. So I'll say sample size wise, it's a little hard to draw statistically significant ideas based off of disaggregating it, just because you can get into some pretty small sample sizes when dividing by race. But we can absolutely publish our findings with some of that disaggregation online, just with a nice asterisk there to be cautious due to the sample size.
Hi, thank you. I'm curious how you think short-term rentals are going to impact our housing stock and what the projections are for the growth of that over time.
Great. I'll make a note of that as we start talking about solutions. We can talk about how we think about short-term rentals in that equation. Did you have your hand up?
Who's next?
Right next to you.
My question was on the same line. In my neighborhood, there's a lot of illegal short-term rentals as opposed to what we know is legal, and how we discern the quantify short-term illegal as opposed to legal.
Okay.
One back here, and then we'll go up front.
Great.
Based on the data that you've given, it looks like the AMI for the aggregate population is about 50,000, but for the black population, it's about 17,000. So I think based on that data, there's nothing you could hardly even rent for 17,000, let alone buy and maintain. At any rate, I think some of that data, the population is going to be, black population is going to be driven downward based on that data. So that's where I see the 13,000 coming in. They're roughly, we've lost in 30 years 50% of black population based on that. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And that we definitely have numbers we'll be including in the final report about that as well.
My interest, well, I'm interested in affordable housing for everyone. But my main interest and focus for myself is 55 plus independent living. And it does not seem that there is any more being built nor in the pipeline. And as I'm seeing now with your projections, that's something that we truly need. Second part to that is security. And if I can just say security, security, security. That all affordable housing should have cameras outside in the parking lots. Yet they're being built and they do not have cameras in the parking lots. The ones inside the buildings are not being monitored for most of the, I'm not going to say 100%. I know the building I'm living in is not even a year old, and they have cameras inside, but they're not being monitored. So there's no one that goes to check on these, to find out if the companies that are managing, the property management companies, are taking care of the buildings.
Got it. So monitoring and safety. Thank you so much for your comments.
Thank you. So I'm not asking for answers and specific numbers or something like that, but as I've listened to some of the questions, for instance, we have issues about how climate change affects things and how that affects migration as well, and other concerns as well. I know you're writing down our concerns. These things have been around for a long time. I'm wondering if, take for example the climate just as one, that have you crunched these into your numbers? Have these gone into the calculus?
Yeah, so I'm going to turn it over to Jara in a minute here to talk about priorities, but you'll see that environmental displacement is one of the factors that we've talked about as a priority to understand.
Time for one more?
One more, yes.
Just for a little bit of clarity, the 13,000 was households or population?
People.
That was people?
Or households, my apologies, total households.
So do you have an estimation on the population as well?
I don't have that in front of me. Let me dig and see if I can get that to you at the end of the meeting.
Okay.
Thank you. My apologies. Okay, with that, I am going to turn it over to Jara.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jara Smith. I'm the Program Director for Equitable Housing Solutions with Enterprise Advisors, and I'm the Project Manager for the Affordable Housing Plan on the consultant team. So Bithy and I will be walking through some preliminary recommendations that we've come through that we'll be presenting tonight. We'll be asking you all to help us prioritize those through Menti. I'm asking you to help us rank what you think will have the greatest impact or what might already have momentum behind it. Really just trying to help us understand what should the city prioritize when it comes to addressing the affordable housing needs of the city. But before getting too deep into the recommendations themselves, the culmination of our research to date really identified these 4 cross-cutting priorities that we want to make sure our strategies really hone in on. Number 1, we want to make sure to prioritize and incentivize particularly long-term affordability, not just 10 or 15-year deals, but long-term affordability to incentivize housing stability. We also want to support affordable housing for individuals making very low incomes. So as Bithia mentioned earlier, the city has a lot of great tools that support housing between 60% of the area median income and 80% of the area median income. But especially if you disaggregate median incomes by race, you'll see that that doesn't necessarily include a significant portion of the city's BIPOC population. Therefore, it's really important that the city figure out a way to reach below that 60% AMI so that its resources are being used equitably. Additionally, based on the fact that the population is graying and a variety of other needs that we've heard, it's really important that the affordable housing be accessible to everyone. And there's a term called universal design that helps to ensure that. So we want to make sure that that is incentivized too. And then last, neighborhood choice. At the end of the day, this is about self-determination. It's about making sure that Asheville's residents are able to choose where to live, how much to pay, and what type of home they want to live in. And so we really want to make sure that Asheville's residents feel empowered to choose where they want to live. Additionally, advancing racial equity is an absolute cross-cutting priority for the affordable housing plan. Now, I should say these are all very big big priorities, right? These are all big challenges. So some of these things are going to take a long time to address. It's not like we can, pass this plan in June and all of a sudden, by the end of the year, the racial home ownership gap will be fixed. So this is a 10-year plan, and we're trying to figure out these strategies that can address these over the long term. The housing ecosystem is a complicated and slow-moving steam tanker, but we're doing our best to figure out ways to get it to adjust its course. But without that digression, we want to make sure that we're prioritizing advancing racial equity, including eliminating racial disparities by looking at the actual systems approaches. And we are utilizing a policy analysis called the Racial Equity Impact Assessment that helps us understand, are there any unintended consequences to our policy recommendations that would adversely impact advancing racial equity. Next, a clear priority that we identified was protecting against displacement. Now, displacement, often folks just think about, being forced to move out of your home, but it's so much more than that. And that's the physical displacement that I have listed here. But there's also cultural displacement, when your community starts to disintegrate, your social ties evaporate. There's also economic displacement, where your job opportunities are going away, or the businesses that you patronize are no longer able to afford their own leases. And there's environmental displacement as well, when climate change and other natural disasters might force folks to move from their home. Then last, it's really important that the city use data to inform the targets for prioritizing investments. More and more, it's becoming clear that the city would love to have some more concrete data on the affordable housing stock in the city so that they can appropriately prioritize their investments and make sure they're leveraging their resources and policy and power effectively. So these cross-cutting priorities, again, are things that we're considering when we look at all the recommendations that I'll be presenting in a moment. So I'm curious to hear from you, how would you refine this North Star, those particular cross-cutting priorities? Would you edit them? Would you add any others? Would you remove any? What are your thoughts? Are we doing this on Menti or? Okay, yeah.
And again, if anybody wants to verbalize.
Yes.
So if you look at the first page in your packet, that'll have them.
Should I go back? Yeah. Yes.
Oh, sorry.
Should I just go back to the?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, there it is.
There we go. 9, 5, 6, 5, 3, 5, 8, 1. Thank you.
All right. And while we love Menti for its polling abilities, unfortunately, it doesn't let us show multiple things at the same time, and things are only open if I'm on the right slide. So everybody should have a paper handout and all of the strategies, the goals, and we have some that we can pass to you if you need one.
I would add in these draft priorities, North Star listing to ensure that property taxes are equitably applied so that a $4 million house doesn't pay 3% while a $40,000 or $400,000 house pays 6%, which is the case now. So I would make sure to add restructuring the entire tax assessment program.
Great, thank you.
I'd add to that restructuring is important, but also making sure that people know about available tax abatement programs, and that those tax abatement programs not require people to jump through hoops in order to get them, but they could easily be done automatically from the city's tax database based on length of home ownership, amount of appreciation, and other factors, and just applied automatically so that people didn't have to know enough and have the wherewithal to go through the application process.
Great, thank you.
I did address a different issue in the Menti, but it only gives you one choice, and I'm having panic attacks about all the trees that are being cut down in my neighborhood. So I just think if there was a way to tie preserving older growth, small patches of forest to lower taxes as well, if we had some incentives for, I mean, the developers are cutting down every tree, even when there's not going to be a building where the tree was. It's terrifying me.
I think we have time for one more.
All right, thank you. So this is not a recommendation. I need education. So if there's a reval at any point in time, and then there's another reval, down the road. So how resilient is the reval that when prices go up for other economic reasons or whatever? In other words, one might think that if you had a reval, that takes into consideration what you need to run your city, county, whatever. And just because prices go up, why does that need an increase in tax in the reval necessarily? And so I'm ignorant as to that answer, so thank you.
So that's a good question. I think we're not going to get too into the weeds about, county and city property tax policy, but one of our recommendations that we'll be getting to in a few minutes is actually evaluating the existing property relief program and modernizing it as appropriate. So I'm going to just put a pause on that, and we'll get to it a little bit later. Sure, time for one more.
I'm just going to bring this up again, but because I don't see it on your list here, I really think that we need to prioritize some sort of security for our residents, and I do not see it here, even to the point of signing in managers that have degrees in health and human services or social work. And also, one other thing, that I believe that all the affordable housing rentals, they really should be accountable for recycling. So.
Thank you. All right. These were as a result of the research that we've done and the conversations that we've had, these are the 5 goals that we identified for the affordable housing plan. And I'm going to start at the bottom and work my way up because the first 2 are pretty foundational. So number 1, we need to broaden and strengthen the affordable housing ecosystem and tools. As we all know, affordable housing crisis is not something unique to Asheville. It's a national crisis, and it's something that the city alone cannot fix on its own. It needs the partnership of the county, the housing authority, nonprofit partners, financial institutions. This needs to be a full court press addressing of this issue. And so it's really important that we broaden and strengthen the affordable housing ecosystem. Additionally, we want to make sure to align place-based policies and programs with related city initiatives. And so what that means is looking at specific areas of the city. We know that not every neighborhood in Asheville is the same as the other. So we want to make sure that these policies are tailored to meet the needs of each neighborhood and community as appropriate. We also want to make sure to promote policies and resources that help residents stay and thrive in Asheville. In fact, most of our recommendations are people-focused because we heard over and over again that residents feel like the city of Asheville is becoming too unaffordable for them and they may not be able to stay. So we want to figure out how to help residents stay and thrive. We also feel it's very important to preserve existing affordable housing and improve housing quality. Oftentimes when we have discussions about affordable housing, we think about, new construction, big new buildings or whatever the case may be, but the city has affordable housing now that is threatened to fall out of its deed restriction or its requirement for affordability, or it is naturally below market and could be picked up by speculators or whatever the case may be. And so it's really important that we focus on preserving what already exists so we can help residents now, whereas new construction, the next goal, takes more time. But we do also need to figure out that additional prong as well and increase the supply of housing that meets the diverse needs of current and future residents. Because as Bithia mentioned, the majority of the city's housing stock was built before 1980. And so the question is, does the housing stock still fit the needs of the residents of the city, and will it still fit the needs of the residents in the year 2050? So, if you'd pull up your Menti, I'd love to know how you'd refine these goals and how you'd, if you'd add anything, if you'd remove anything. Sure. Yeah. Well, so it's on the bottom of the first page, but I can say them. So it's broadening and strengthening the affordable housing ecosystem. It's aligning place-based initiatives in the city, so looking at those neighborhood-specific, geographically targeted programming. It's promoting policies that help residents stay and thrive in Asheville, preserving affordable housing and improving existing housing quality, and increasing the housing supply to meet the diverse needs of residents. And so for each one of these goals, we've essentially saddled all of our strategies underneath them, and we'll be going through those in a moment to prioritize them. Yes. Oh, a microphone? Yeah.
I wanted to talk about the legacy neighborhoods that are in Asheville and how much we would like to keep the character of our neighborhood intact with the development and everything that's going on, and what the city plans to do to help us do that. We have had a lot of gentrifications in our neighborhoods, so we want the people that are in our neighborhood to stay in our neighborhood. And as you know, we have lost a lot of Afro-American people in Asheville as a whole. So we would like to make sure they want to come back and come to our neighborhoods.
Thank you. I also saw a question up here about how we're defining affordability in this study. Traditionally, folks think about if a house is affordable or a rental is affordable to someone making 80% or less AMI, then that's considered affordable housing. That said, we're looking at solutions for across the spectrum. Asheville residents across the income spectrum are facing the crunch right now, but our priority is addressing 80% or below. Any other comments on the goals before we move on to strategies? We are a little behind, so I'd like to keep moving if we can. Shocker, I know, we've got a lot of information.
The thing that's concerning me throughout this discussion is that you were saying, the plan has to have a scope of, say, 10 years. But if the people on the lower end of this may well not be here 10 years from now because they can't afford to be. So how are we going to deal with that? I mean, it solves a problem if they go away, but I don't see that that's compatible.
I understand. Yeah, absolutely. And so I should say, these recommendations won't wait 10 years to come to fruition. And part of the exercise tonight is to help us understand what recommendations should we prioritize and enact, now, sooner than later. I'd love to hear where you think there's some low-hanging fruit, where you think we can have the greatest impact in the short term, because you're absolutely right. There are some things that we need to do right now to help residents right now. There are other recommendations that are just invariably going to take longer to get, the programs up and running, the funding in the right place, the capacity of the staff and the community to absorb those funds and policies and programs. So we're trying to figure out what are those quick and solutions that we can use now to help residents today. So thank you for raising that. All right, going to the first one. Okay. So this is the first policy goal, as you'll remember, promoting policies and resources that help residents stay and thrive in Asheville. And so we have 3 different subsections of this. This is the only one that has subsections, but again, it's people focused. So we made sure that this, had the most robust strategies. So number 1, looking at renters. So building a rental registry. That's essentially an inventory of all the rental properties or renters in the city. Right now that doesn't exist, and what that does is it helps the city get a better understanding of the affordable housing environment and helps them evaluate trends over time. It's also important, we feel, that we expand tenant protections, and that could include source of income protections. For instance, folks can be discriminated against if they're applying for a house but receive some kind of financial assistance to pay for it. So what can we do to protect those folks from being discriminated against? Additionally, increasing access to legal assistance, helping folks mitigate eviction or negotiating with their landlords safely. Additionally, just cause eviction. What this is when a landlord is required to give a reason to evict someone or not renew their lease as opposed to just leaving them high and dry. It's really important that residents have a justification for why they're evicted and why they're forced to move from their home. We're also advocating for increasing the acceptance of rental assistance, and rental assistance can mean a wide variety of things. Most folks think about housing choice vouchers, but it goes beyond that. And so we think it's really important that that landlords and property owners accept rental assistance from a variety of different sources. We also are advocating for providing emergency rental assistance. I think the pandemic showed all of us just how close folks are from losing their homes. They could be 1 or 2 paychecks away from being unhoused. And so emergency rental assistance can really do a significant or make a significant impact in helping to keep people in their homes and maintaining housing stability, which is not only good for those residents, but good for everybody. And then last, increasing rental options for households with the greatest barriers. So an example of this is that sometimes nonprofits will sign what's known as a master lease with a property for multiple units, and then the nonprofit essentially absorbs any risk that is incurred by the residents who live in those particular units. So those who might face the greatest barriers are those with severe disabilities, justice-involved individuals, or those who are formerly unhoused. What can we do to help them find housing when they have some of the greatest barriers to accessing it? So we'll pull up the poll, and we'll ask you to please help us rank these and prioritize these. And so when you're thinking about, ranking them, I'd love to understand what you think will hit the greatest need. What do you think might have the greatest impact? And in particular, we're thinking about short and long-term strategies because these recommendations are going to be phased over time. So what do you think we can do now or sooner than later to help residents today? You pick 2 or 3? Yeah. No, go.
There's a lot of them. So even if you just want to rank the top 2 or 3, you don't have to rank all of them that are on the list. That'll be a great signal to us.
Yeah, sure.
Can you clarify the difference between source of income protections and increased acceptance of rental assistance?
Sure. So those are very similar in their own way. But for instance, increasing rental assistance acceptance is like incentivizing property owners to accept those, not necessarily. So income protection can mean like property owners are not allowed to know where the source of their income is. Accepting rental assistance means that they will know that it's a housing choice voucher, whatever the case may be, but they must or should or are incentivized to accept it.
I'll also add to that, it can also be providing funds for landlords who do choose to accept rental assistance to make critical repairs. So there could be some other incentives that are paired with that. So it's not just a requirement. We're working with the city right now to answer some questions about North Carolina's enabling environment and what the city can do right now versus what might be a longer term play. And so source of income protections as a policy, if it's something that's included, might be a longer term move. So there's some shorter term actions that might need to be taken since it might not be a guarantee that that's something the city can enact.
So also, you have up there just cause evictions, which it's my understanding that that's a Raleigh thing, that not an Asheville thing, but we don't have rent control, which is also a Raleigh thing.
Right.
That's not an Asheville thing. So in my opinion, like if we're talking about Raleigh, like rent control is like up there with just cause eviction, but just kind of naming that our city council, I don't think, can do much around just cause eviction.
Yes, thank you for that distinction. And I should say some of these recommendations we are recognizing are going to be part of the city's state legislative agenda because they would require some kind of state action to do so.
The other one of those that definitely could be overridden by Raleigh is number 5, increasing acceptance of rental assistance, because anything that mandates that a landlord accept something, Raleigh will undermine it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we have time for one more.
As a landlord that accepts HACA, I'd just like to address that other landlords have a lot of lack of knowledge about the fact, about what is involved with accepting people with rental acceptance. I love my HACA tenants. That's money in the bank every month, no questions. And they do often give us incentives to the landlords to encourage them to accept HACA clients. And I think a lot could be done just to inform the landlords. It doesn't even have to be about forcing people to do anything.
Thank you. Great. Should we move on to the next one? Okay, excellent. Okay, are there any other strategies that you'd like to see the city consider for this particular policy area? I should also say, we'll be launching the survey on the city's website, and so other ideas that come up can also be added there at a later date.
Yeah, I'd like to say something. I'd like to, some kind of standardized rental application process.
Yes.
You go to one place, $50, another $125 here, and you have to, every property you go to, you got to do it all over again. That is a cost that's ridiculous.
Yes.
And I think it should be standard. If they do it once, that's it.
Yeah, a common application
Right.
sort of thing. Right, great. Yeah.
I see Vicki has her hand up. She might want to give a plug for a program.
I'm with Just Economics, and we have developed a centralized rental application.
That's right.
And so we are working to try to get landlords, the challenge is to try to get landlords to voluntarily sign up for that program because we have plenty of tenants who want to use it or sign up for that tool, but plenty of tenants that want to use it, but not landlords that have a lot of units available that want to give up those application fees. But we certainly know that that's a huge issue.
Thank you.
It would be a great thing if there was some technical assistance provided to the local housing authority to be a better developer and a better landlord. They are the largest landlord, I believe, in Asheville, and they haven't developed a project in quite a long time. So I'm seeing that would be a very valuable and worthwhile project, and some other issues as well that deal with quality. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. We're definitely talking to the Housing Authority as part of this process. Jared and I just met with Director Pierre a few weeks ago, and so we'll continue to engage them as we flesh out the rest of these strategies. All right, these are great ideas that are coming through here, so thank you so, so much. And you'll see a few of these in the slides coming up. So the next piece around policies and resources to help existing residents stay and thrive in Asheville focus more around home ownership. So either people who are currently homeowners and want to stay in their home, as well as residents who are currently renting but are ready to take that next step and buy their home. So the first is around expanding home repair resources. We know that that's already offered through a few different organizations in town, but thinking about expanding the impact that we can have, because we know that's a critical tool in helping residents stay in their homes. A lot of times residents feel the pressure to sell or move because they don't have enough to replace that roof or get a new HVAC system. So we know this is a really critical tool that already is existing here. Another idea that we've talked about is down payment and mortgage subsidy assistance, whether that's citywide or targeted at certain neighborhoods. I know I saw reparations come up on that last what's missing from here. That's also very much something we're thinking about. We've been tracking the work that the housing focus area of the Reparations Commission has been doing. And we know last night there was the Cease the Harm presentation at City Council as well, so definitely tracking and thinking through what a reparations-oriented home ownership program could look like and or home repair assistance program. Another idea is around home ownership readiness. And we know this is something the city's already funding, but something to continue investing in. Thinking about the number of households that are interested, just want to learn a little bit more about what it means, or maybe need some support improving credit scores, or tackling some of those other challenges that they might have while working with banks. And last but not least is working with financial institutions, banks, to explore what are called special purpose credit programs. And this is a tailored program where banks are able to, without being predatory, do special products that get to households with lower credit scores. And so that's something that we've been working with a bank in a larger area, but we know that's something that banks in Asheville might be interested in as well to meet the specific needs of Asheville residents. So we're gonna do the same thing that we did for that last goal. So we'll have the opportunity to prioritize. Like I said, even if you just pick 2, that's really helpful. And then we'll have that next question around, are there any other strategies that you'd love for us to be thinking about? Or any concerns or unintended consequences that you see that might be associated with any of the ideas that we've floated this evening? So give everybody a second. If you have any questions, feel free to let us know. Got a hand in the back, Nikki.
I do know that LIHTC and that, well, I don't want to get into those intricacies of that, but as a BIPOC developer, there are a lot of us who are left out of the system, and I think that I know that there are federal regulations about some of it, and of course financial ratios that have to be dealt with as well, but representation means everything. And when we go into repair Black homes, we find that they are totally almost collapsed due to the fact that most Black elderly homeowners do not trust mainstream institutions because of what urban renewal did. And most of the time when we broach city and county, we're told that we, A, don't have any experience simply because we've been excluded from and redlined and all of the other for ad infinitum. And then the second thing is you need to pair with somebody who's an experienced developer, and all that does is give us naming rights. No power and no wealth generation. So I've looked this over and I see somewhere where you allude to it, but all of the false barriers or predicated barriers that are set up to keep BIPOC developers out, those barriers need to come down because representation means everything. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, or if people felt good about their priorities? Yes.
Thank you. I think something that's really important in regards to home repair is ensuring that we're prioritizing policies that make it easier for these nonprofits who are doing the work to actually do the work rather than creating policies that make it more difficult and limited.
Heard. Absolutely heard. All right, I'm going to slide to the next round. Any other ideas or any concerns? I want to make sure we hear those too. And in your packet, it should, if you're not on that page, it'll be on the next page is that list of ideas.
I did put this in the writing, but I just want to say this to the room as well. Right now, there is subsidy for larger renters. I'm a landlord. And I just went in to look for some grant funding, and it's all for developments of 30 or more units. Whereas if we had some subsidies for 1 to, say, even 10 units, a lot of the landowners right here in Asheville have room for a small additional unit, which would actually, add up. Things like having to subdivide and survey, add a connection to the sewer, the extremely high cost of building loan. If any of this, we got help with any of this, I would have so many more units right now to offer for rental, and then eventually those would go on the market to sell.
Love this. Y'all are getting ahead of the game. The community land trusts. Excellent. Anything else? All right, let's head over to systems. Okay. And some of these have already been alluded to, as I mentioned. So looking at systems level approaches, how do we increase awareness of existing resources and rights? That is one of those, things that we can do right now that doesn't require financing or additional legislation from Raleigh in order to do it. We also want to advocate for creating a centralized affordable housing waitlist and application portal for properties with dedicated units supported by the city or county. Prioritizing legacy residents for city subsidized developments. Assessing the effectiveness of the existing property tax relief tools and modernizing it as appropriate, and increasing investment in community land trusts, both for sale and for rental properties. So again, if you rank those, even just 2 would be really helpful. Letting us know what you think would have the greatest impact in the short term, meet the greatest need. Great.
I have a question.
Sure.
The last one, increase investment in community land trusts for sale and rent. I'm an advocate of people when they buy their home, they buy the land because that's wealth there. And when they don't, that's wealth they won't have. So I wanted you to explain that.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're right that community land trusts, it's a kind of organization where it's a shared equity model, and the resale value of homes is usually limited in order to keep them affordable. Your point about the capping of the resale value is absolutely correct. It could potentially limit wealth building and intergenerational wealth building in particular. And so I should say, not every one of these tools are going to be the best for everybody, but the community land trust might be a good model for some folks to enter home ownership. And as we said, it's also for rental too. But you're right, it has shortcomings, but a lot of these policies will have trade-offs, and we'll be having to navigate which ones will work best for the city and for who. But thank you for that note. Wow, we're pretty even. All right. So again, are there any strategies that are missing or any other concerns you have about those particular recommendations? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Just some way to keep that in check, or even have any, while being able to support and incentivize homeowners.
Yeah.
Because it can't just be property owners that bear the burden of keeping homeowners.
Right. Thank you.
Models of like, how do we come together? How do we create community? Or for myself personally, the way I lived in Asheville was I had housemates for years,
Mhm.
and my son grew up with
housemates. And I think for myself, it worked, not for everybody, but I think we have to go away from the model of like, I live in my little box, in my little house, versus how do I really share resources with people? Because that little box costs a lot. Everyone has to heat their little box. And so I think that takes guidance. I mean, I don't think it's just an easy solution. I think it's something that we have to learn how to work together more in community and share our resources in order to have things actually be affordable.
Right. So what I'm hearing is looking at, non-traditional forms of rentals or home ownership, diversifying options and choice for residents.
With incentives.
With incentives.
So like if you choose to enter into a collective situation, you're incentivizing that. Hey, if everybody gets along, we've got more wealth.
Right. Great. Thank you. Anything else?
It's been alluded to a little bit, but anything that we can do as a city to reduce the barriers to growing the inventory. That's what my concern is. A lot of these recommendations, it's almost like, well, there's this inventory that we just can't get the people to. Well, there's no inventory to get the people to. And that's as big of an issue, if not bigger than people being able to have the access to the capital to be able to make those first purchases.
Definitely appreciate that. I'm going to move us to our next goal, which is about preserving what we've got. But then right after that is the goal around increasing the supply. So definitely heard. So with preservation, we're really thinking about preserving the homes that already exist, whether they're affordable because they have some kind of federal or state or local funding that requires them to stay affordable, or if they're just naturally affordable, they're being rented out or sold for affordable home prices because of the market. Something that we've talked about as an idea is creating an inventory of all affordable properties. So those that have rent restrictions, as well as those that are naturally occurring, they're just affordable as the market drives. And another idea is then to basically use that inventory to think about strategic acquisitions. So if we know that there's, for example, property that was funded with low-income housing tax credits. I know that came up earlier. If it's set to expire in a few years, because we know a lot of federal funding tools come with a time frame, so it might have to be affordable for 15 years or 30 years, whatever the term is, being able to track when does it expire, and then how do we start thinking through proactively how we keep it affordable if it's set to expire soon. Or if it's just something that's on the market that's affordable, and there's a landlord who says, I just can't do this anymore, but I want to make sure it lands in the hands of somebody who's committed to keeping these prices affordable so we don't displace our residents. Thinking about how city and partners, importantly, can come together to think about strategies to acquire those types of properties. There's also a concept of tenant and community opportunity to purchase. It's basically, if a property owner is looking to sell, creating opportunities for tenants to come together to purchase that property, or trusted and qualified community organizations who can come together and keep those units affordable as well. I think this came up earlier, but the need for resources for small and nonprofit landlords to make critical health and safety repairs or energy efficiency repairs, but making that type of capital available to small and nonprofit landlords. And then last but not least on this one is the need to preserve mobile home parks. This is something we heard directly from resident groups who are really working to find strategies to do this thoughtfully, not just preserving, but also improving the quality and making sure it's safe and healthy for its residents. Any questions about these as I open up the survey? And if you're not on the page that has these strategies, it's the next one in your packet as well. Yes, in the back, Nikki.
I was just wondering why there's no reference to modular housing either. A lot of people are fairly ignorant. In fact, I work with a group that turned a proposal into a citizen-led evaluation team at Buncombe County for development of modular housing, and some of the comments came back that they were mobile homes. So those are cost-effective. The other thing, is that when city and county staff are scoring applications from developers, permanency of affordability needs to be built in. It needs to be scored higher. For instance, a lot of people will talk about a LIHTC, but when you dissect the LIHTC, a lot of times heavy loaded developer fees are in there. So I would admonish that there needs to be education on all levels with that. Thank you.
Thank you.
On that note also, when you say create an inventory of all affordable properties, for instance, when a developer exceeds their density and they're forced to do, let's say, 80% AMI, well, for X amount of period of years, how do we know after that period of years that that's going to continue? That if someone moves out, is the next person that's moving in going to get a benefit of that 80% and it just doesn't go back up to the, that they're held to the accountability of what they're offering?
Appreciate that. And I'm going to slide the screen, but I'm seeing we've got a tie at the top here, but definitely keep talking.
Yeah, this is just kind of along those same lines. I know that like with this affordable housing plan, things are going to change in how the city incentivizes. But looking back at the Luigi grant, the land use incentive grant that the city has given before, I feel like I've asked this question several times and never gotten the answer. But like we have some units that have been subsidized at because they're providing units at 80% area median income. But landlords often require you to pay 3 times the, or be able to afford 3 times the rent in order to qualify. So there's a very slim margin of people who make less than 80% AMI and over 3 times the needed rent in order to qualify. And so just kind of getting an understand, this is not like a solution, this is just a question for us to consider. And, you know, and also just like, we can't be at 80%, we need to be at 60% or below.
Definitely heard. And if you flash back to that first page on the priority slide where we're like very low income, 60% AMI is exactly what we mean there as like the priority area, 60% and below. So thank you for that. And also thinking about where there's local flexibility to determine eligibility, how can that be calculated? Absolutely heard.
I don't know where to put it, but there's so many great solutions here, and it seems to me that it's going to be really important that we have adequate city staff to implement all of these really important strategies. And so I hope that there's opportunity to reflect that in the plan that we need investment in our city staff.
Absolutely. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Hello. I would like to advocate for 30% AMI because how many years in the future is it going to be before that 30% AMI today is 80% AMI? So if we're really doing stuff for the future, go for 30% today, and then in probably a year or two, it's going to be 80% in relation to where prices are with everything. So just my opinion.
Thank you.
30%, please.
Heard. All right. Anything, other ideas or concerns for us to be thinking about as we refine these? Appreciate the comment on the potential exploitation of a database. That's something that we have talked about. I've worked in cities where we've done it and it's managed by a third party. So there's some ways that we can think about it. But definitely appreciate that concern. All right, we are somehow at 7:18 p.m. I don't know where this last hour and 18 minutes have gone, but I'm going to turn it to Jared to take the next.
All right, so policy goal number 3 is, as you mentioned earlier, sir, increasing the supply of housing that meets the needs of current and future needs, residents, excuse me. So this includes increasing regulatory incentives citywide for affordable housing, additionally reducing regulatory barriers to building it citywide. The city is already developing city-owned property for affordable housing, but how can that be done more strategically and in a more targeted fashion? Additionally, we've advocated for creating an acquisition fund for affordable housing, especially for the housing that is below market rate, but not necessarily required to be so through a deed restriction. it's really important that those properties get acquired before speculators are able to come in and flip those properties. Also, supporting other plans and policy initiatives that diversify housing choice, such as the Missing Middle Study. One of the things that we've been doing a lot with city staff is learning what other initiatives and efforts are going on in the city to make sure that we're aligning our recommendations and our goals with those. We also want to require all developers that receive city funding to accept rental assistance. I thought, yeah, there'd be support for that. And of course, additional support for constructing affordable for-sale homes. So if there's any questions about that, I'm happy to answer, but there are also little brief descriptions in your packet. We'd love to hear what you think we should be prioritizing.
A question for increasing supply. In your efforts, when we are seeing the large increase in our older population that's coming, I was wondering if you were planning on looking into whether or not these units need to be for sale or for rent for the elderly, which preference there might be.
I mean, again, it's about choice, right? It's about providing both rental and for sale opportunities. And I know that assisted living communities can have a variety of different ways that they operate in terms of ownership or renters. So really, it's meeting whatever needs there are of those particular residents and making sure that we have options for both.
Instead of saying assisted living, let's say independent.
Sure, yeah, of course. Thank you.
Okay, because
yes.
I think that there's a vast difference.
Yes,
and
you're right.
What we need is independent living for the elderly.
You're absolutely right. Thank you.
Because you're fairly independent until you're 80,
Right.
85 sometimes, you know?
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I live in an affordable house, but I don't see a lot being talked about on the taxes. Mine literally doubled from 1 year to, when they reevaluated. So my house is fast becoming unaffordable due to property taxes. But I could apply for a decrease. So why don't we reevaluate and get it really in line with what my house is worth instead of, overstating it, but then giving me money to help pay it?
Right. Absolutely. And that is actually one of our recommendations from earlier is examining the existing property tax relief policy and modernizing it. So thank you for highlighting that.
And just quickly, what is increased regulatory incentives? How does that flesh out? What is that?
So, I mean, the city already has a variety of incentives that it uses to support affordable housing development, whether that's supporting nonprofit developers or market rate developers and having and using a variety of different tools to incentivize, including affordable housing units within those properties. So it's just figuring out how to further incentivize that kind of support that the city can provide both for nonprofit and market rate developers. And I think Bithia would like to add some more.
Yeah, so examples of that could be density bonuses, reduced parking requirements, thinking about how process might be changed to allow developments with affordability to move through processes while still getting the quality review from the city, but a little faster. Could be fee reduction, so a wide swath of options.
Great. Any other questions or thoughts on priorities? Okay. What about what we're missing? Or do you have any other concerns about these particular recommendations? We got everything and all these recommendations are perfect? I'm just kidding. We will be launching we'll be launching the survey on the city's website in the next couple of days. So as other ideas may come to mind, please feel free to visit the website and submit them that way. Mm-hmm. I know the city is looking at a variety of different zoning changes. Investing in capacity of nonprofit and housing developers, that's one of our recommendations for broadening and strengthening the ecosystem, but great. Excellent.
All right. We are moving into those bottom two foundational ones. Appreciate everybody's engagement over these last few ones. We are rounding out the final curve here. So this section really is in response to what we heard about different neighborhoods need different things. Citywide policies and programs might make sense in some places, but for other types of programs, things might need to be tailored, or zoning might need to be changed in some neighborhoods, but not others. So with that, thinking about place-based regulatory incentives, so similar to the citywide one we were thinking about in the last slide, but recognizing not all of those necessarily need to be citywide. Some of them might be in commercial corridor-based kind of districts versus more residential areas. So we know there's different types of land uses that might be better fits for certain types of incentives as well. City already does a capital improvement plans, thinking about how to align where city dollars are going in the capital improvement plan with also building new housing or affordable housing or preserving housing that's near increased public investment. We know that Asheville's transit doesn't look like transit in everywhere else, but thinking about what does transit-oriented development or transit-accessible development in Asheville look like, and how can we encourage for there to be alignment with housing affordability there. Fourth, thinking about land banking, which is basically strategically acquiring vacant, abandoned, or dilapidated properties and redeveloping those for affordable housing where it's feasible and makes sense. And then last but not least, thinking about review thresholds that the city currently has for developments that have dedicated affordable housing. So right now, developments that have 50 or more units automatically go to city council for approval. Thinking about, does it make sense to change that number if affordable housing units are included? I'm gonna open up our poll, but let me know if you have any questions as you think about prioritizing these.
Mechanism for transit-oriented developers, transit-oriented developments from the city of Asheville, since HUD and the USDOT do provide funding, both due to cities and municipalities who have it. Can a mechanism be set up to take that subsidy and that funding and redirect it towards a developer who would put that? We have one transit-oriented development place here that immediately comes to my mind, where the city already has a transit center and is expanding. So it's been my, I guess, wish for 2 or 3 years that they have it designated as a transit-oriented corridor TOC. So I'm just wondering, with the funds that are raised from that, could those be directed towards a developer who would build there, especially permanently affordable housing?
Really appreciate that idea. Thank you.
I just want to say real quick also too that like several of us in this room work in a transit coalition, and it's really hard to get like the city and county to invest in transit in the way in which it needs to. But like when we're looking at those 13,000 households and we're looking at our small roads and traffic and parking, and if we want more affordable housing, like we have to center that we have to start building that now, because it's not going to be built overnight. And so if that's our future, like we need a transit system, we need to build that system now. And we're seeing that like with the county's like has this development that they're planning out in Ferry Road, and the bus system doesn't go to it. And we're like, you need, like, there's going to be a whole lot of voucher acceptance there, and there's a whole bunch of people that will be left out of this if we don't figure out a transportation solution. So just like throwing in kind of the advocacy that needs to happen to prioritize transit in with like coupled with affordable housing.
Absolutely heard. I'm going to slide us to this slide. Any other questions or comments? Any other ideas or unintended consequences you might see? Can we wait? Sorry, can we wait for the mic to get to you? I just want to make sure the live stream can hear you.
Yeah, transit. I think we have to, again, incentivize people. Oh, hey, did you, here's a bike. if you use your bike, this is going to be your benefit. Like, if you walked, it's going to be your benefit, because we assume that, I don't know, it's kind of bougie sometimes. Oh, I bike. But we have to make those things accessible to people so that they can use them. I mean, the European models where, like, I look at Holland and the Netherlands and everyone has, you know, just really easy biking.
Thank you for that. All right, seeing some great other ideas coming up.
Just a thought on what the lady just said about biking and so forth, especially as the population is going to grow older and older in the coming years. A lot of those options are not available to people with age-related illnesses, COPD and things like that. And therefore, there also has to be multimodal transportation option available that is oriented towards where affordable housing is built.
Absolutely. Sidewalks, yes.
Yeah, there's other infrastructure things you have to look at, like utilities. How are they going to run water, sewer, storm drain off all these new apartment complexes building everywhere? I drove down I-26 coming in Asheville, and I'm like, where's the trees? There's nothing but, we're going to look like Greece, you know, nothing but buildings. And, you know, where's this beautiful place that I came to 23 years ago to live here?
Definitely heard. Thank you. I just want to call out our comment here around more dance breaks. Jira and I joked about getting up and doing something halfway through, but appreciate y'all hanging with us. With that, I'm going to turn it to Jira to talk through the last, but certainly not least important goal that we've been talking about that we'd love to hear your thoughts on.
All right, we're pulling into the final stop, everybody. So the last policy goal, broadening and strengthening the affordable housing ecosystem and tools. So as I said earlier, and as you all are well aware, this is something that the city alone cannot accomplish. It needs all the players to come to the table to solve this affordable housing crisis. And that means city departments, the housing authority, the continuum of care, Buncombe County, the local regional council, bringing everybody to the table. Additionally, increasing the funds dedicated to affordable housing to meet the diverse housing needs of the city residents. And that could take a variety of different forms, including finding new dedicated and consistent funds for affordable housing, increasing the competitiveness for state housing resources such as low-income housing tax credits, creating a more supportive environment for community development financial institutions. So those are financial institutions that are mission-driven and often serve lower income communities. Additionally, convening and facilitating a funders collaborative. There are resources out there. How do we leverage those resources together so that we can achieve these affordable housing goals? And very importantly, increasing collaboration with major employers, in particular the hospitality industry. Increasingly around the country, employers are recognizing that it's difficult to hire folks when they can't afford to live where you're employing them. So how can we bring employers into the mix? And as we've discussed in a good amount tonight, building the capacity of local nonprofit developers, particularly local BIPOC developers. How do we support more wealth growing opportunities and more support for local nonprofit developers? And last, increasing the capacity of nonprofit service providers, because we know those services are often essential to affordable housing residents. So,
I'd just like to mention that in the last day or two, the Biden administration has announced a huge focus on housing and housing availability, and that suggests that there may be an opportunity, if we get through this next election cycle, to have a major improvement in federal dollars going to support these efforts, and making sure that we have the capacity here locally to tap into those kinds of programs to make sure that we get our share of federal support is absolutely essential.
That's such a great point. You know, so often we can come up with policy ideas, but there isn't the community capacity to absorb it, or there isn't the staff capacity to administer it. So really making sure that there's a foundation for effectiveness of these policies is really important. So thank you for bringing that up.
How many developments have been approved in our area now that include affordable units? Do we have a number? Because, I mean, it looks like there is a lot of building going on. So how many units are in the works right now?
I don't have the spreadsheet in front of me at this moment. I might defer to Nikki or Sasha on that number, or how to best answer that.
I couldn't tell you all.
Right. There's an inventory. I'm sorry that I don't remember the number off the top of my head, but the point, I think, is that, I wouldn't be here today if it was sufficient, right?
One other thing, and I'm not sure that it goes here, it might have to go back to goal 3 or something, is along with that infrastructure that you just mentioned, we should be requiring every publicly subsidized or every development that wants to build in Asheville, whether it's affordable or semi-affordable or deeply affordable, to include geothermal and solar, other renewable passive energy sources. And we have ample, when a developer is building out in the country, or in the county, they can certainly include that, but everywhere in the city, there's ample opportunity to require solar energy for a lot of these places, or geothermal, or even wind. And I think that should be considered as part of the requirement for future development.
That's a great point. Thank you.
You mentioned incentivizing employers or finding a way to get employers to help with the housing crisis. Obviously, the most important thing that employers can do is pay people more. Duh. The second thing that this city and county could do to assist in this is to turn their attention to incentivizing sectors of our economy that have good paying jobs already, and making sure that we have the workforce, that we invest in the workforce that can fill those jobs, so that we end up with a more robust local economy here that is not over-dependent on tourism. And if you want to know more about it, please come talk to me, sustainavl.org.
Thank you.
I just want to throw a little comment on the guy about the solar and other environmental things. So I don't know if any other people are aware about this, but the Duke plant that is down at Lake Julian, since it used to be a coal-fired power plant, there are some major incentives for people to do renewable resources in a specific area around Lake Julian. I could help you find the maps if you want to. I've looked them up before, but it's like for residential and for commercial, it's very big incentives for them to put solar panels and other types of environmental things.
That's a great point. And actually, the Inflation Reduction Act includes a lot of opportunities for energy efficiency and that kind of stuff. So that's something we're looking at too. But thank you.
I was just looking and thinking immediately the city needs to educate and market its GO bond for affordable housing. That's coming right up. And I haven't seen a whole lot done, particularly with community groups. The other thing is instituting a formal community benefits agreement. As when we worked with the consultant a long time ago, we were talking about, and City Council immediately took on the position as that most neighborhood and community groups take on when they lobby a developer coming in. And I think they did it with the hotel down on Haywood Street, but they did it after the fact, after they had extended permit and got a lawsuit going. But I would think that it would be more effective if they would work with citizens who would advocate for those bundle of community benefits, affordable housing, and living wages.
Thank you. Any other final thoughts? I know we're a little over time, so we should probably be wrapping up.
All right, I'm gonna leave this up for a split second. If you have any other ideas that you were like, I don't know if there was a goal it was supposed to live under, feel free to just throw them on this one, and we'll comb through this one as a little bit of a catch-all for everybody as well. Like we said, there'll be a survey up on the website in a few days, the next 1 or 2 days specifically. So that'll be another chance to provide any other comments or ideas that you have as well. But y'all, thank you so much. Can all take a moment to exhale? We covered a lot of ground tonight, so thank you so much. Round of applause for all of you. And we do want to give you a sneak peek of what's ahead. So this is where we are right now in engagement. The survey is going to be online, so we want to hear from as many people as we can. So talk to your neighbors, share this. Once that link's online, we'll do an update on the public input website. So for those of you who are signed up there, or if you check the box on the sign-in sheet that you want updates, you'll get a notification that the survey's online. We'd love for you to get the word out to as many people as you can, that they too can share their ideas. We'll take all of that, revise these ideas that we've had, refine them, really think about how to tighten things up. In parallel, like we just heard, the city is talking about its next general obligation bond. So we're going to be thinking about, what do these recommendations have to do with that GO bond? So that's something that we're thinking about in really real terms right now. We're also going to be creating an implementation roadmap. We know the city has plans. Cities across the country have lots of plans that don't necessarily have teeth or clear next steps for them. And so we're going to be working with the city and partners. So hopefully some of you in this room to think through, who are the players at the table? What's the phasing of these things? What are potential funding resources to really make these come alive? And how do we measure success for these as well? And all of that we're going to be presenting out to council through a work session, hopefully in May. And then in the weeks to come after that, we'll be rolling out the final plan. So appreciate y'all's participation with us this evening. I want to give a special thank you to all of you. I also want to give a special thank you to Jackie, who is with us with Interpretation Services, for joining us this evening. It meant a lot for her to show up. And this final announcement, for those of you who drove and parked in one of the city garages, if you didn't grab parking validation on your way in, make sure you grab it on your way out. Thank you, thank you, thank you.